As a global culture obsessed with cults, we know very little about what it's truly like to be in one, much less what it takes to escape and start a normal life for yourself. Welcome to the Just Dumb Enough podcast, a show that acknowledges no one is always an expert by dispelling misconceptions with real experts. I'm your host as always, Colton Petrie. My guest today is Gabriel Milon. Gabriel was born into a very famous Christianity-based cult, and by the time he tried to make a normal life, he had to rebuild who he was from the ground up. It's not all black cloaks and daggers with human sacrifice, but it is an absolutely enlightening and engaging story. So stick around. Let's be careful with who we call Grandpa. Welcome to the show, Gabriel Milon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So excited to have you on the show. Why don't you kind of introduce yourself for the listeners?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Gabriel Milon. I am 30 years old, and I was born in a cult. The cult's name is the Family International, but we were formerly known as the Children of God. It's a cult that was started by a man, rather deranged, if I can say so, to put it lightly. David Berg, an American who was raised by his mother, who was called Virginia Brantberg, who was a pastor in big churches and stuff around America. And then as he got older, he decided to create, I guess, the cult obviously that I was raised in. Started back in like the 60s. So yeah, it was very strange. I mean, obviously, when you're born into a cult, obviously you don't know that it is a cult. You don't know really what you're in for really in life. It's all I knew. It's all my siblings knew, and it's all that all the children and young people that I lived with and know. It was all that we knew at the time. So I think one thing about our cult, and I think some other cults, but I think our cult in particular, which was quite interesting, was that we spread out rather quickly after its conception. There was some run-ins with the law or something that was going on in like the 60s and early 70s that made our leader, who we knew as Grandpa, we called him Grandpa because it was like this familial thing, breaking down the small family unit and turning it into like a united effort. That's why, calling it the Family International, that was our family. We saw these people as like figureheads of our family. And one thing that we did a lot of, again, like I said, we spread out all over the world. We had homes in Asia and Australia and every continent you can imagine. So traveling was a big thing. There was constant traveling. For my family, we traveled for the first 10 years of my life. We were always traveling. So that was very difficult. And I think for young children growing up in a environment where they don't have like a specific base or kind of structure or stability, you enter in this stage as a young person and being hyper vigilant. You never know, we never knew what to expect next. There was times where we'd be living in Italy for about 6 months and all of a sudden we'd be going to Denmark and then to Spain. And then my parents split up, and then me and some of my siblings, we went down to South Africa for a while. So it was just a lot of traveling, a lot of new experiences, but very, very difficult, very kind of, looking back, it's very traumatic. The fact that, there's so much traveling, there's so much uncertainty around your lives, around our lives and how it was. So that was very difficult. I would say that was one of the big things that I was dealing with.
Yeah. Were you socialized enough in all these places that you went to that you knew most people don't move this often?
Yeah, there were some people in our cult that decided with their families that they were going to stay in one place. So they had their own home. People sometimes would join homes like that, and then those people would move along. But there were some people that, they did. Their parents kind of realized, I think, that as much as they enjoyed living in the cult and being part of that environment and that community spirit that we had in the group, they decided not to do that. But for the majority of us, we were constantly moving, constantly on the go.
Well, and it certainly seems like, that's a big part of this cult, this one in particular's ideology is to build this very close community. We are all a family and this is what we do to kind of keep people, on the inside.
That's exactly it. And I think one thing that I learned after the cult sort of disbanded And my family and I, we moved out and left the group and started to live, in normal society, quote unquote. Was that the generation of people that joined the cult from my parents' generation, they were basically told in no uncertain terms that it was like, now you're joining a cult, now you're joining this group. Of course, they didn't really know they also didn't really know what they were in for, but they had to cut ties with their parents. So cults really isolate you from that. From whatever life you had before, you can't really go back to that. You have to be devoted and dedicate your entire life and the rest of your life to the mission, to going out and preaching the word of God to all people. So there's an aspect of that as well. Yeah, that it's like, your old life is dead and gone, and this is your new life.
Well, and you had said, David Berg had kind of grown up in this very religious setting. Was it mostly like a Christian cult, or was there like a very specific drive to it?
No, it was very much rooted in the Bible and Bible verses and yeah, just Christian living, but obviously with that added thing of, with the dogma around it that was only kind of just unique to this specific group. But one thing that was really kind of pushed was a rather like sexually liberated attitude, I guess also because of the time that it was formed was around the time of the hippie movement, with Woodstock and all of that. So like a lot of people that joined the group had been in that lifestyle. So I guess there was also that kind of almost gypsy mentality of like, we love traveling, let's get on the road, let's meet new people, let's go and reach people in third world countries and help and tell them about Jesus. There was a lot about that. It wasn't just about getting new members. It was just about also spreading the word of God, the same way I think like the Mormons do it, or the Jehovah's Witness or whatever, where they do go on like mission trips and stuff.
Yeah, which I think, if you're on the inside, kind of lends some credibility to it. Is you're like, oh, we're not doing anything any differently than a normal missionary does. Like, this is just how religion works.
Right. That's it. And it was, yeah, I don't know. It's such a layered thing. It's such a complex and nuanced thing. And I think the only people that could really understand the gravity of it and what really goes into actually being born and raised in the brainwashing that's instated and instilled in you from like as young as I can remember personally, is someone else who's also, been raised in a cult. So it's not a situation of like, I joined freely. I was not given the choice. Obviously, it was my whole life back then.
Well, and tell me about some of that. Just, what was the daily, brainwashing that goes into it that now that you have some perspective, you're like, oh, that was really weird.
There was just a lot of reading of the Word of God, as in the Bible, but mainly reading the letters that were sent out and circulated amongst the homes from the leadership, as in from the cult leader, the prophet. And his sort of inner circle would kind of circulate a lot of this stuff, a lot of this sort of, I guess you could almost call it propaganda for the cult, and keeping people interested and keeping people drawn in and excited. There was this sense of excitement as well. And I think a lot of cults do that, where they kind of other themselves and kind of say like, we are the chosen ones, we are the ones that are God's chosen people, or we are the ones that are, it's our responsibility to save the world, so I think it kind of excites people in a way, because they feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves and bigger than what they might have experienced if they were joining, bigger than what they had maybe gone through living normal life with a job or whatever. So there was a lot of that. So I guess day-to-day life was a lot of that, a lot of the reading, a lot of the, watching, and, watching also videos about the group and what we believed in and all of that kind of stuff. And then a lot of going out to evangelize, basically. I remember as young as maybe 6 years old, going like door to door in Italy, somewhere in Italy, I don't really remember where, in the dead of winter, going from like different houses trying to sell different things. So we also sold like calendars or magazines that were all made and circulated into in the cult, basically to also make some money on money for our individual homes. So there was a lot of that for sure. Yeah.
Well, and that's kind of a big thing in a lot of cults is like, were people allowed to have jobs outside of the group, or was it very much like, you've got to work on our projects exclusively?
Yeah, it was definitely much, you're working on our you're working within this group, you're working for the greater good of the cult and circulating our message and keeping people within, in this environment, very much kind of in a bubble within society, operating kind of a little bit under the radar, as a lot of cults do. So they would scout people who they could see potential for, if there were musicians, maybe they were curious to join, or actors even were kind of scouted and then brought into the group to also kind of help with the making of videos and producing, entertainment as well for the people within the cult, and then a slightly more sanitized version for the masses.
Well, and this is kind of a unique cult, I guess, as far as I know. I don't know a lot about cults, but in that, the Family International was everywhere. It wasn't just like in one spot in one city where they were all like clustered together.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what kind of the mission became, was let's kind of spread out and deliver this message to as many people as possible in as many different countries and to as many different types of people as possible. And find the ones that we felt kind of were worthy of maybe being part of the whole mission, and getting them sort of within the fold, so to speak. And that included a lot of, love bombing, for example, kind of right away, kind of inundating people around us or people that were interested in what we were doing with lots of love. And, we care about you. We love you, this, whatever, that kind of mentality of really trying to ensnare people right from the get-go, and using a lot of those tools that I think we weren't even aware that we were using, but it was just, bog standard cult 101 sort of tactics.
Yeah, they just kind of tell you like, oh, this is how we feel about people. So when you meet them, make sure you tell them that you love them a lot.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I think something that was very significant as well is like, once my family and I, once we got out of the group and we started to live like in normal society, that was a time in the cult as well, where they kind of wanted to sort of dissolve things. They were kind of seeing that the changing of the times, technology was on the rise, and there was just, I guess, a different atmosphere that they felt like maybe our group was not going to be able to continue operating the way that they wanted it to. So we left at the end of that, and it was very interesting. Leaving around 2008 is when we did, and I had to go to high school for the first time. Public school, going to college, then university, and it all started to catch up on me, and I think everyone that was in the cult, as in the people that were born in the cult, kind of like, wow, like the gravity of it kind of hits after a while, and I think that happens to anybody really that goes through childhood traumas, that as the years go on, you start to exhibit signs of, trauma responses and triggers and all of that kind of stuff. And that's what happened to me for sure. And luckily, through a lot of years of therapy, and before that, a lot of years of not really understanding what was wrong with me, but knowing there was something wrong, there was something that was holding me back from kind of being at the same level and the same sort of understanding of things as my peers were. So, but yeah, luckily with a lot of therapy and a lot of understanding of myself and examining what my traumas were and how did it impact me in my day-to-day life, has become a very important thing for me and has really benefited my life for sure.
Yeah. Well, and as you got out, like you said, you got out with your whole family?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, did you then find some stability? Like, did you all move to, one spot and just say, like, this is where we're going to stay now?
Yeah. I mean, my older siblings, they were older, obviously, so they were ready to kind of live on their own, and sort of, some of them started families, and so yeah, it was difficult. We were all trying to find our place in our own unique way, kind of dealing with our own kind of version of what was going on and the deprogramming that it takes. I never really thought about it, in fact, for the first couple of years, that there was need for some kind of conscious deprogramming, because of course, when you're inundated with that kind of dogma and that kind of specific sort of rearing and what was sort of around us and what we were learning about day after day, it takes a toll on the brain, on the psyche. So, it is about a lot of conscious sort of understanding of, okay, well, this was wrong. If this was a really bad thing that happened, and recognizing it and understanding it for what it was, and healing from it is obviously, again, very, very, very important.
When was there a conversation, as a family where you're saying like, hey, they say we're not going to church anymore? Did they say like, we've been a part of a cult and we're leaving now?
No, 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 no. That word was not really used so much, especially by the parents and my parents and stuff. It was more like, I think my dad in particular was just like, let's just sort of hit the ground running. Let's get the kids in school. Let's find some normalcy and stability. And yeah, it was pretty much that. It took over time to start seeing, okay, this is kind of the reality of what we were up against and what we had to deal with from a young age, you know.
Do you ever, as family members or siblings or whoever, do you ever come back together and kind of talk about that, to kind of work through some of it together?
Yes, for sure, to an extent. But I think as well, we've all found our own ways of processing it. Like for me, what really helped was being in therapy, was doing it that way. But I think everyone has their own ways to heal and to grow and to learn about themselves and, the things that they went through. So we kind of did it as well to an extent, sort of independently, which I think was also necessary. I think that's also quite common, is that it takes time as well, and a lot of personal, inner work, that you can only really do with yourself.
Well, and even, going through therapy, it's a very difficult process because it requires a lot of introspection. How much of that, did you try to resist because you're like, no, this is part of who I am and not just, what I lived? When something comes up and you're like, oh, I tell people I love them a lot. Did you have to, break that to say like, that's not who I am, that's what they were, versus like,
Yeah.
no, I just like to tell people I love them?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess there are some of those kind of traits, I think, that do kind of linger. Not for everybody. I think a lot of people, a lot of the ones that I know that left, that wasn't really a problem for them. But actually, in particular for me, there was that sort of thing, because I think it did really hit a nerve, and it did actually give me something to think about and a challenge for myself, to be part of that initiative to help people, to do things for people, to tell them about God and all of that. So I guess there was sort of an element of it of like, okay, maybe some of my ways of interacting with people maybe comes across as being sort of influenced by that sort of mentality. But that's also something that was kind of recognized with my with therapy and stuff like that really helped me to see those things and to see, sort of separate myself from the dogma, from what I was taught, But obviously as well, I was very young, obviously, when not very young, but I was like a preteen when I left the cult. So I don't think it impacted me to the level of someone that maybe was older when they left, who had lived a longer time in the cult.
Perhaps some of your older siblings?
Yeah.
Well, in some of those, you're like, being compassionate and caring about people, there's nothing wrong with that. You're like, so I don't want to get rid of it. I just have to, like you said, detach from the dogma around it.
Yes, exactly. Definitely. And I think it was also a lot of examining of like reasons why I had a hard time keeping a job, as in this was the time before I started therapy, of, there was this sort of inconsistency. I was having a hard time really kind of finding a foundation for myself, or a sense of like inner stability, but also just stability in a practical sense. Like it was just difficult for those ways. And that goes back to what I was saying before about when you are a young person or a young child traveling a lot, it's the hypervigilance. So I was always kind of, for the first couple of years outside of the cult, I was always thinking like, okay, like what's the next change? I was almost like anticipating it. So I was having a hard time sort of staying with one thing. It was this kind of like constant need to adapt, because that's all I remember doing when I was younger, was always having to adapt to new situations, new people around me, a new home to go to, living with other families that I'd never met before, and having to sort of learn how to get along with that and navigate those sort of situations with new people, and from all walks of life.
Well, and do you think, I mean, even with therapy, all of that has been purged, or do you think some of it kind of lingers?
I think if you've been in a cult, or if you've had some at whatever level of brainwashing, whatever it might have been, that you never really do get over it completely. There will always be some vestiges left, and I think the best thing is just to kind of heal as much as possible, and it's a process, and it's not a short one. It's not one that can be fixed, in whatever kind of time. Obviously, for everyone it's different. Everyone kind of heals and grows and changes at different rates, and in different times in their life. And for me, it's taken the time that it has, and I'm happy with the progress. I'm proud of myself with the progress that I've made in my life to get to this point in my life. And I have found a lot of stability now. I found a lot of good people that I trust, that I can rely on. So I would say that now it's gotten so much better, and it's, as the years go on, it gets easier and easier, I guess.
Well, and congratulations on doing so much work. I mean, this would be a challenge just like the average person that was born in a small town. Some of them have a lot of trouble going to therapy and trying to talk about issues, much less having like a systemic issue that affected not only your life, but every life around you.
That's it. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I think now also from the vantage point that I'm at now in my life, I can look back and also kind of see like the telltale signs of how a cult is formed, how it develops and morphs over time, and the tactics that cult members use to ensnare new members into the flock, so to speak, into, all in the name of Jesus and of course the prophet, his physical form on earth, as told by the prophet, of course, who obviously a lot of these cult leaders have massive egos. They are complete narcissists. They kind of feed off the attention and the respect and love and admiration of their followers, that they see as lesser than, of course, that are kind of working for them.
Well, I'd love to get into that. I have one more personal question that is maybe very personal, but I was really hoping you kind of have an answer for.
Yeah, go for it.
So within this cult, they had a very direct sense of purpose where they said, like, this is your mission, is to spread the word, to bring new people in, to do all these things. Has it been hard to, like identify a purpose outside of that since leaving?
Well, yeah, that's a really great question. Yeah, I would say actually for the first, I guess when I was, when we first left, I started high school, and I think that was kind of my purpose, was like, okay, let me just sort of, it wasn't even so conscious, but like it was sort of like, okay, the mentality was, let me just kind of get going now. Let me just start enjoying and appreciating and getting the experience that, that I'm finally able to experience, now that I feel as, finally part of like society, at large. And as the years went on and as I got older and I was thinking about like career opportunities and like where I wanted to live and, what kind of life did I envision for myself, it was difficult, I guess, to even think about that or to kind of find a set sort of path or kind of chart my own path in life, because there was no talk of that, obviously. In a cult, they want to keep you in, they don't want anyone to leave. They don't want anyone to leave because they're obviously, not only do they just want to keep these people inside as a sense of control and power over them, but also the leaders and people in the different homes and stuff, they were concerned that when someone would leave, they would tell their story and they would expose the darker, more nefarious sides of the cult. And this is what happened. There was, as far back as when the cult was first starting and with the first sort of generation of young people that were being born into the cult, a lot of them started to leave. And, the cult really went into like damage control to make sure that like, to kind of almost scare the rest of us into thinking like, there's no life after the cult. If you leave, you're going to be so directionless. You're going to have a very meaningless life. You're never going to find the meaning that you had in the cults. But as the years went on, yeah, there was many years of confusion and kind of feeling like, what really is my purpose? But I think one thing that I do love and one thing that I'm very grateful for that has always kind of followed me is just my creative side. Like I've always been a creative, writing poetry from a young age, writing short stories, learning how to play, the guitar, learning how to, make music and all that kind of stuff. So I had a lot of those outlets, and that sort of kind of tied me over until I kind of started to find what my purpose in life was. So now I think I've been through so much also in the cult, but also after the cult, having to find my feet and find my way in life, now I'm sort of in a place that like it's going to sort of come and be more clear as time goes on, as I do more work on myself and continue to sort of improve and to process things and to find closure from a lot of what I went through, whatever, what I thought was going to be my life for the rest of my life. You really are told that you're going to be dedicating your life to Jesus and waiting for the end of the world to come, when Jesus comes back, whatever else they believe. So that's sort of where I'm at right now in my life.
Well, I think a lot of people, just struggle to find purpose, where they're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing in my life. And it sounds like you had, a good anchor to say like, well, this is my passion. And as long as I pursue that, I might find a new purpose or another purpose, much less like, I think the average person would be devastated to be like, well, this is my purpose, and then lose it. They'd
Right.
be like, oh no, what do I do now? But you had kind of that anchor to say like, well, I love this creativity that I'm now allowed to fully express. Like, I can put
Yeah.
time into this.
Definitely, definitely. And I think as well, there is that sense of when you're in a cult, you kind of really, you do feel like you're a part of something. I mean, there was a lot of people actually, young people that never really felt fully a part of it, that kind of intrinsically knew that there was something wrong with this, that this was not normal life. We were sheltered from a lot of what was going on in the world. There was only certain films from like Hollywood or whatever, certain movies that we were allowed to watch if they had like a good message that could be kind of linked or compared to our lives or whatever. But there was obviously, there was a lot of that, and I think with being creative, that kind of carried things on. So obviously now I don't have any of those sense of belonging or sense of purpose that I had in the cult, but the purpose that I've found is kind of carried me through is, like you said, obviously the creative side, and that's been definitely a big blessing in my life.
That's fantastic. Do you have to go back and binge a lot of classic movies to try and catch up?
Oh, I did my research right away. I'm a big lover of movies and music, and I've gone through more than most people. I think even people at my age, no matter what, where how they were raised. I'm very into film history and the history of Hollywood, and watched a lot of films like that, and listened to a lot of music. And I don't really feel actually that I was left out of anything sort of particular in pop culture or in the world. I'm happy with how I've managed to digest and get into different interests of mine, different types of music or whatever.
Yeah, that's kind of fun because you get to go back and experience, like, oh, I'm very into alternative rock right now. And then you can go backwards and start from the beginning to like catch up. And you're like, oh, I got to experience the entirety of alternative rock the way I wanted to do it. And now I can move on.
Yeah, exactly. I think another aspect as well that was quite difficult as well at the beginning, on top of everything else, was I felt like it was difficult to tell people. Like, I just didn't. I felt like there was a stigma around the idea of like telling people around you or in your life or at work or whatever that you were raised in a cult. It comes with so many questions, and people already have a lot of questions, even if I'm not telling them that, because I'm from a mixed background. My parents are from two different countries. I was raised in different countries, so I don't really have, people always have a lot of questions when I tell them about my background. So that was also kind of a challenge to deal with. And but I don't know, that now looking back, I kind of like the fact that my life is a little bit colorful, that there are some aspects of it when you take away the cult aspect. I'm kind of grateful for the fact that I was able to live in different countries and travel around a lot. But obviously at the age I was at, it shouldn't have happened. Obviously, that's something that you do when you get older. That's something after you do when you've really established a good base with your family and one sort of community or whatever.
Do you have a go-to answer now when people are like, oh, where are you from? And you just say like, everywhere.
Yeah, I would, I say sort of that, like, my parents were missionary workers, and that I'm born in France. My mom is Danish. I lived in some different countries. So yeah, I've got a little sort of speech that I just kind of slip into without even thinking about it. Something that it's a certain little set thing that I tell people, like the very much abridged version about my past.
That's fun. So, I mean, so what about now? Like looking back retrospectively, has Family International entirely dissolved?
No, not completely. I think there's still like an online presence, but and there's probably still some people as well that kind of follow the traditions that were laid out and the kind of the blueprint that was laid out by the cult. But everyone who was born in the cult, obviously, we've all gone on just to live our own lives wherever it is, being, in business or different career paths or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, it's basically phasing out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, luckily so. And I think also what's kind of interesting when I think about now, like now the kind of I don't feel the stigma as much. I think there's also more dialogue and a lot more discourse around cults. You see a lot of these documentary specials about it, and our cult has been featured on a number of them, and there's been exposés about it, and articles written about it and stuff. So now I feel like there's less stigma. I'm able to tell some of my very close friends that I trust. I have shared that with them, and that's definitely been a sense of freedom, I think, after being so many years. I think there's also like a sense of like shame because you don't really want to be seen as like something different, kind of like the other. We already kind of felt that while we were in the cult, and then going out into normal society, it's like we kind of want to just sort of blend in. I think that's sort of the thing of like kind of assimilating and adapting, and so there is that. And I also find it interesting, like online when people are discussing cults, a lot of times I've seen comments where it's like, oh my God, how could they not see it was a cult? Like they're these people, and like, it seems so strange, or like I would never have fallen for those tricks, or like why would anyone want to be in a cult anyway? And I think they talk about it as if it's something that could never happen to them because it's something they just kind of see on their TV. It's probably part of their like thing of like watching many different, true crime docs about different stuff, that kind of plays into it. And actually, I think it can happen to anybody. And even in today's society, I mean, according to experts like professor and psychologist Steve Eichel, there's up to 10,000 cults still active today in the US alone, notwithstanding the world. And I think as he put it, most cults, they exist under the radar and rarely draw national attention. A lot of them we've had moments even within the cult and the decades that the cult was in full kind of action and fully up and running of people trying to expose it, basically people that have left, ex-members or parents of people that were trying to talk about it and raise awareness, like my kid is in this group and I don't know what's really going on with them. So, there has been cults like Nexium. I don't know if you've heard of that one. That was pretty big, but a lot of cults, they do go under the radar for the most part. And now you even have this new one, which is run by Robert Shin, I believe his name is, at 7M Management. And he's using TikTok as a way to get young people involved in his cult. And I've been finding it fascinating. I watched a Netflix special about it, and I couldn't believe, I was completely blown away by the fact that there was so many things that I could compare to how our cult was run. They're also one that has grown from a following of like 1.78 million to 10.42 million followers, as in followers on social media. Obviously, not actual people that are in the cult. That'd be pretty crazy if that was the amount of people. But people that are watching it, so that means potential members for their cult. People are watching it on TikTok, seeing all these dancers doing all the TikTok dances. And I think something that I feel like people take advantage of when they decide, I guess, to want to start some kind of group or organization or cult is that they really feel out the zeitgeist of the moment. Our cult was started during a time where it was, like I said before, about the hippies and all that kind of stuff. And our cult leader took advantage of that time. He could see that there was a lot of people that were a lot of young people that were lost and confused. They didn't want to be part of their parents' sort of lifestyle. They wanted to do things a bit differently. And now with these young people on TikTok, he's kind of seeing that as like an avenue now to gain members. So it's very kind of surreal to kind of be presented with it now in today's society.
Yeah. And I mean, even if you took it like 1% of their followers are actual devoted followers, 10.7, like that's what, 107,000 people? That would be a ton of people.
Yeah.
Do all of these cults kind of have like the same, is it like there's a design playbook where you're like, this is the architecture that has to exist for a cult to run?
Yeah, definitely. I think some of the big ones are like isolating members and penalizing them for leaving. So making, like I said before, about this kind of creating like an environment of fear around anyone asking questions, anyone even being a little bit just curious about like, well, why is this what we believe in? And why is this, any of that kind of dissension is squashed or silenced, in fear of more people kind of coming up with questions. And then maybe the whole fabric of the ideology kind of falls away if that happens. And I think seeking an inappropriate loyalty to their leaders is another big one. Dishonoring the family unit, absolute authoritarianism without meaningful accountability. None of these people at the top of the chain of the cult and the leaders and the mastermind behind our cults were never took any kind of accountability. Even to this day, they know that they know that a lot of young people are suffering because of it, and they have never really come out with any meaningful apology or kind of recognizing maybe where they had really, really messed with people's minds. They don't see it like that, and I think that's definitely a big sign of that. And there's no, like, for example, like there's no legitimate reason to leave. Former followers are always wrong in leaving, negative or even evil for that. They demonize that. So that those people are not seen as heroes to the people that maybe are still in the cult that want to leave. They want to demonize them as much as possible.
Well, and it seems like there would be a big mindset difference in there where, like, if you're the entry level cult member and your child leaves, in your brain, you're like, this is wrong. Like, just by nature, I believe it. It has to be wrong. Whereas, if you're in charge of the cult, do you think they know, like, intrinsically, they're just like, oh, people are figuring it out and I did a bad thing? Or do you think they honestly believe that they're like, well, they shouldn't have left because I'm the only path forward?
I mean, unfortunately, we can't ask the leader because he's since passed. But I think there is some kind of like almost megalomaniac kind of mentality where it's like they are so they have conditioned so many people that it almost seems like, yeah, they're so in love with the dogma, with the teachings of it. They are so a part of it, and the people in their inner circle are so a part of it and feed into that kind of obsession around it that I think they see it. They see it almost as like the going back to Roman times when the Christians were being persecuted by Emperor Nero. These people died for their beliefs, and I think they have that kind of thing of like any kind of persecution or any kind of hits that the cult may take is more further proof that we were on the right path and that we're doing the right thing, because God's chosen people are always going to be attacked or criticized, or people are always going to want to tear them down. So it's kind of this like victim complex, or this kind of victim complex / God complex.
Because I could see it, they start with like 10 people and they're like, look, I know that I am lying through my teeth really hard right now to kind of keep these people here. And then at some point you're like, I have 100,000 people that are listening to my every word. I don't doubt that I'm right anymore. Like, I know I'm right. And they just kind of buy into it.
Yeah, definitely. They have to buy into their own thing. I think that's definitely a big part of it. Yeah, for sure.
Because I think we've seen a lot of like, I think true crime docs and a lot of stuff has kind of caught up to where we're being very honest about it. But there were definitely a lot of misconceptions where people are like, oh, in cults, life is so far different that like it would be immediately recognizable. And most people that have come out of a cult are like, it's not that recognizable. Like, you wouldn't know it just by like seeing it on the street.
It's so insidious. I think that's one of the best words I could use to describe it, is that it's like it's a slow process. I mean, they use certain tactics that I think all cults use. And in the moment when you're, especially, I think cult members and cult leaders, they will target people who they can kind of sense maybe don't belong or feel lost or feel confused, And in those moments when, if you're someone that's dealing with a lot, or you're feeling kind of lost or depressed or whatever, that cult member can really latch onto that, and you won't even know it's happening, but it is happening. But there's some kind of aspect about that's very curious. It piques people's interest. And I don't think that everyone is susceptible to cult-like behavior. I think that there are people that have that kind of that sort of inner sort of voice maybe that kind of tells them like, oh, this is weird, or this kind of thing is, I just want to live my life. Like, what are these people trying to do? Like, bring me into this sort of environment. It just seems so random or so strange. So I think there's people like that probably would not, but I think it happens more than people realize, otherwise they wouldn't be so many cults active. So it can't be that all of these people who join cults are easily susceptible or naive. I think that it's a testament to just human nature and people's desire to feel like they belong somewhere. Like maybe if they've had problems at home, or they don't feel accepted by their parents for whatever reason, that's already a prime target, for a cult to kind of exact their sort of way of getting into people's minds and bringing them in.
Well, and it seems like there has to be, once you're in the cult and you're doing the recruiting, like you got to figure out your targets pretty easily, because somebody who is like staunchly atheist and lives by the word of science, you're like, I'm not going to be able to convert that guy. He's a pretty hard hit. But we're a very Christian cult with just some minor tweaks. I could probably sell that to somebody who is already Christian and just having a very hard time in life.
Right.
So when you talk about this or to people, are there like some obvious red flags? I know we've talked about like, if you're demonizing people who are leaving and things like that, but are there red flags when you're on the inside that really like, hey, take an extra look around, you might be in a cult right now?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's that idea of like, if you're around people that are sort of so sort of, I don't know, like so excited about what they're doing, and they talk about it as like, we are doing this, we are changing the world. It's stuff like that. It's like this extreme sort of like intense language that is being used. I think that's a sign right there that like, what is this really? Or any kind of talk about how the world around, like this normal society is wrong or is bad, and they paint all of it as that, because that's what we were raised to think. We were like, I don't know, like almost like an army that was like surveying like a whole, I don't know, crowd of people or whatever, and seeing that these people are in need of us, that we are the ones that are going to liberate these people. And only a chosen few will be chosen, and the rest are just, lost and confused, and they're stuck in that mindset or whatever. And I think any kind of demonizing society and kind of generalizing society as all bad is, again, another big kind of alarm bell that should go off of like, okay, this is strange. There's a lot about society that might be problematic or difficult or wrong in society, but of course that's what it's like, that's the reality of it. But there's also something so amazing about it, of just kind of living a normal life.
Well, it's one of those that I think I could see the counter arguments really easily when we say like, if they're demonizing certain behavior. I believe it's Mormons. I think part of the religion is like, don't drink. And so it's like, okay, well, we, shame people for drinking, but you're not like looking out at the vast crowd and saying like, look at these people who are consuming alcohol. They're all going to hell and there's nothing you can do about it. Like, they're like, no, I mean, we should probably try and convert them, but if that's a thing they're going to do, like, I can't change them as a person.
Right. That's exactly it.
It's very hard because inside the cult, you're like, well, yeah, but see, like Mormons do it. They have a thing that says don't do that, or Christians do it. They have 10 commandments that say don't do things. So, like, it's not so different. We're just like everybody else.
There's definitely, that's such a good point that you made, because that really leads on to something else I think about cults, is that there's this sort of, like telling yourself these things, rationalizing all of this stuff. So anything, because cults develop, our cult developed so much that we went by 2 different names. So there is so much involvement. So as the years go on, like 4 people that joined, especially in the early days of the cult, and even sort of in the like 80s and 90s as well, who joined, there's, I can look back and I can chart the different times where there was some very significant new sort of belief systems or rituals that were kind of put in place, or kind of ideas that were being implemented to kind of get people even more into it, but also kind of, they start with kind of a wholesome sort of message, a very simplistic form. And as the years go on, things get more complicated, things get more nuanced, more boundaries and morals start to kind of fall away by the wayside. And I think cult members will fall into two separate camps. One will be sort of just telling themselves in a cycle of like, well, yeah, this is a bit weird, or this is not what I expected, or this is not what I really signed up for. But, there must be a good reason because, the leader is saying this, and I look at everyone around me, everyone is still so happy and they're getting on with things and they're not asking questions. And then you have the other ones that little voice in the back of their mind starts to say like, this is wrong. Like, this doesn't feel right. This is not what I signed up for. And then it can maybe take some time over those years for that voice to kind of get a bit louder, and then eventually sort of, okay, it's time to leave. Like, for example, in the early days of the cult, maybe 80s or 70s, I think, was when the Phoenix family joined. So River Phoenix and Joaquin Phoenix and his family were apart for a short time, as well as Rose McGowan and her parents. And as far as I know, their parents must have really had that voice very loud on as very quickly were they realizing this was not right for their children to be a part of, and they left very early on. And there was other families as well that kind of did that, but obviously there was, like I said, the second camp of people who were like, okay, it's a bit strange, but I'm going to hold on, it makes sense. And, it's something I'm part of now. And I think the more you stay in a cult, especially as someone who joins a cult, not was raised in one, I think you start to be like, well, what's there to go back to? I've already given so much of my life. And if I realize now, if I make this realization of this decision to leave, it's like, well, all those years completely wasted. Were these years like for nothing? So I think there's that thing. And that's, again, how cults work and operate, and how they can operate for as long as they do, is that sort of mentality of like, well, we're challenging you here. Like the leadership will say, like, we're challenging you with this new information. And we know it's a bit shocking, but we promise you that it's all going to make sense. It's all part of the greater plan. It's all part of what Jesus wants you to do and what Jesus wants and expects of us. So they put a lot of responsibility. They put a lot of like, there's like a lot of like emotional blackmailing going on for sure.
Well, and it seems like a mixture of, a sunk cost where you're like, I've spent 5 years here. If I leave, like, it's wasted 5 years, like you said. And also, what if they're right? Like there has to be a bit of this trepidation where you're like, oh no, what if they're right though? What if I leave and then all of this comes true and then I've doomed myself?
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that's also very scary. There's a part of it that, especially for the young people that started to leave before it started to kind of dissolve and started, being kind of accepted that people were leaving, But in the early stages, like also in the 90s, there were some like young teenagers, especially in America, who were asking questions. They were being treated badly. They were seeing that when their questions were being asked, it was met with a lot of like, don't question this. This is not something to question. This is your responsibility. This is your duty to just follow what is being told. And if you don't, you're not following God's plan for your life, And going back to the 7M cult, in 2009, Lydia Chung was one of the girls that joined. She filed a lawsuit saying that Shekinah Church and Robert Shin, the leader, had isolated her from her family, brainwashed her, and defrauded her out of $4 million, which was allegedly funneled into Shin's non-tax-paying church fund or whatever it was, and that things like that. This again ties in with the whole thing of like how cults really do follow a similar blueprint. That's very, very, very difficult. And I think for a lot of the ones that left early on from our group, I think there was a time where it was very traumatic, but I think as well there was a lot of them that said just how liberating it was, how it was like it just took the decision to leave. It was so much shame and guilt at first and scared and like, well, I'm leaving my family behind and I'm leaving friends that I've known for so many years. But it was that moment once you leave, you're like, oh, that it makes sense now. Now I can see the picture. The picture starts to kind of fully show because you've managed to escape the brainwashing, escape what was the status quo.
Yeah, it seems really easy to say on the outside, like, look, it only gets better. But it's very hard. I mean, it seems like you'd have to have an exit strategy, much like there's a blueprint to build the cult. You have to have an exit strategy to leave because you have to know, like, I am losing this community, maybe members of my family. Like, trying to get out is not easy, but it is very rewarding. It's just hard to see that in the short term to say, like, I got to bail.
I think there was a lot of them actually that didn't really have any idea because they had no reference for an idea. They never had a job. A lot of these guys were 17, 18, 19, and they'd never had a full-time job. So they just kind of had to almost, some of them had grandparents that they got into contact with that they had never really been able to be around because, of course, that their own extended family was cut off, and the extended family that they knew was just everyone in the cult. So those ones kind of had a little bit of a landing pad to start with, and then from there to kind of jump to whatever they want to do in their life. But a lot of people from that left, especially in the, in like the 80s and 90s, they just kind of had to hit the ground running and kind of make the best of it, and I think that also shows the resilience and the triumph of the human spirit, that no matter what you go through, there are kind of aspects that are going to kind of reveal themselves as ways to kind of triumph over adversity, as cliche as that sounds.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's one of those sayings that has stuck around for a reason, right? Because it's true. But you think there's a best practice, like, hey, if you're going to leave, here's your best step. Like, number one is just run, like sprint away as fast as you can.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's different for everybody, it's different for everybody in that environment and how they kind of deal with it, I'm lucky for how it went for me. I mean, as difficult as it has been, it's been also, looking back, like a great learning experience, and something that has shaped me now, but is not something that defines me. I think that's a really important thing, as well, as I don't want to be seen as a victim, because I have triumphed as much as I have, and as much as I could have ever have. So I'm grateful for that, but at the same time, obviously, there is that aspect of course, I wish it had never happened, but it's also made me stronger and wiser, I think, and more perceptive about society now, and how to navigate and notice when groupthink is happening, because it's not just within cults, but groupthink can become, something within like a small group on Reddit or something like that, or a group of people on Discord, or wherever it could be, on whatever platform or wherever in society. And those ideas or whatever that people are sharing can turn into something toxic. It's very important to notice when things are becoming a little bit cult-like around you. So it doesn't even mean that you're part of a cult per se, but when you get involved in group thinking, when you start to kind of see things all through within like a small community, it can turn very toxic, and it can turn very, very strange, where you're only kind of in your own little bubble, or in your own little echo chamber with other people, and you're not able to see other sides of the coin, or other people's point of view, whether it's in a political sense or in a societal kind of capacity. And I think that's also very prescient for how things have gone in society as well, with the extreme left or the extreme right, or different schools of thought. I think it's so important for young people as well, growing up in the age of information with social media and everything like that, is to really be skeptical, and that's probably the best advice I could give to anybody, really, is to be skeptical and to sharpen up on critical thinking, having a way of kind of taking that inner moment with yourself and say, like, is this really right? This way of what people are saying that I should be thinking, or that I should be acting in life, or whatever. Is it really the right way to go? Or maybe there's another opportunity, or another alternative that maybe I should be looking into, or kind of sort of being sort of centrist, kind of being sort of in the middle, and taking the good and the bad from all different schools of thought.
Well, it's one of those that, as the world has expanded and we've got the internet and we can now reach across countries, in the blink of an eye, it seems like people grab onto an identity, more and more, where they're like, anywhere I can find it, if it's, being part of a political party, or it's being part of a social movement, or it's being part of whatever, like they grab onto that and then try and hold it as tightly as possible. Like, well, I must share every single one of these ideas because I need the first one to be true, so that I'm not like so alone.
Right. I do agree. Yeah, it is a strange one. It's very nuanced. All of this kind of talk is all very nuanced. It's not easy to pin down any of this stuff, especially with cults, because it still feels like a phenomena in a way. It still feels like kind of strange and kind of disturbing. And I think it's just it's never going to feel normalized, and it should never be normalized, obviously, but it's never going to really feel like something I can just understand or grasp. It's nothing you can really explain in a couple sentences. Like a lot of concepts that are in the world and in society, it's one of those very, very unique things that kind of crop up, and you only see glimpses of it or talks about it every now and then. It's not really something that dominates any kind of, mainstream media or whatever. So it does always feel a little bit like a novelty still, I think, for a lot of people, and even for me sometimes.
Well, and I think it's given you this gift of critical thinking, like you'd said, where you now look at every idea individually. So you say, like, yes, I agree with that one, but no, not with that one. And that's fine, because like both of these are my groups. They're just not my identity.
Right. That's it. I think that's the problem, is that if you start to kind of attach it to your identity, and it becomes a part of like who you think you really are, and it's part of that. I think it's so important to see yourself still as an individual. I think individual schools of thought are so important, and thinking for yourself and making those final decisions with yourself, whether it's like sleep on it or, take some time with yourself to kind of see like, where am I going? Like, where is this idea that I'm starting to follow? Where could it end? If I go too far down this rabbit hole, is it going to end with me kind of losing myself or kind of losing my identity? And my identity is going to be fully enmeshed in what this idea or ideology is.
Certainly. Well, I think that's a great message to leave people to kind of sit and simmer on. But thank you, Gabriel, for so much for being here. I mean, this has been an incredibly enlightening talk, so I've appreciated your time immensely.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful talking to you, and the questions that you've been asking as well have been giving me some time to ponder and think of also things that I actually haven't really thought about in that way. So yeah, this has been really engaging and also very enlightening for me too. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah, of course. I know you're working in lots of creative spaces. Is there anywhere you want to share with people if they want to find you or reach out and see more?
Not really, actually. I'm still sort of, it's a lot of like my creative process has been kind of a little bit personal to me at this point, but I am working on some projects. So at some point these things will start being sort of more public, and I'll want to share it with other people. But for right now, it's still something quite personal to me.
I completely understand. And this is, like I said, been an awesome talk. So, maybe once you get more into these and you start getting some public face time, you want to come back and tell us about, getting into whatever they are. I'd love to have you back.
Thank you so much.
This story of escape and successful life after a cult is really something that makes me feel good and hopeful. But for as much as we touched on, there is hours more content about the darkness and depravity behind the Children of God cult. Honestly, I don't think there is a solid reason for this show to dive into the worst of the worst. If you found this episode entertaining, use it as a springboard to seek out other shows like Last Podcast on the Left, who did a full 5-part series on the inner workings. In other news, July is almost over and rankings have updated just a little. Number 1, the United States, now led by New York, California, and Texas. Number 2, England of the United Kingdom. Number 3, Canada, led by Ontario, with British Columbia trying to catch up last minute. Number 4, Australia, with South Wales holding a lead and Victoria trailing behind. And number 5, Ghana, overtaking New Zealand this week. It is a tight race, and we are close up in the last few days of this month. That's it for this week. Have a great week, a great weekend, and I'll see you all back here next week for another new episode. Until that next episode, pretty pleased to all those things that help the show grow, like rating, reviewing, liking, and subscribing. Remember, you can reach out to dumbenoughpodcast@gmail.com or on any of the social medias if you want to reach me personally. But most importantly, stay dumb.